All right, everybody. Welcome to the new episode of the KAAMP. My name is Thomas Zachary. I'm here with someone who I think is really, really cool and was a big influence on my artistic development through my teen years. And she just recently wrote a book of poetry, and I'm super jazzed about it. So here we are. Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Danita Dodson, and I am a poet, a writer, a budding writer, although I've taught writing for a good number of years. I've finally taken the time to release my own creativity into the world, and I'm blessed to have this interview. I think so much of the work that you've done supporting other writers. And I hail from the little hamlet of Sneedville, also known as Sneed Vegas, in lovely Hancock County.
Affectionately known as Sneed Vegas.
And you know this place all too well. Yeah, I feel much today blessed to be in this space and do this interview, but also think that you're getting your turn to quiz me after all those.
Yeah, I do definitely have my turn to put you on the spot. I didn't think about it, but you're totally right.
It's karma.
I suppose so.
After so many Spanish quizzes. Right?
Yeah, which my boss holds me to, since I work in a workplace that has fluent Spanish
For
spoken.
real.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, well, it's a long time coming, but I'm polishing those skills up again.
So it's coming back.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Slowly.
It's in the vault.
But
there.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
So outside of words, did you ever play with pictures?
Did I ever play with pictures?
Yeah, did you ever use, visual arts as an expression?
Not painting. I did try that. Not too great at that. I do have my Jackson Pollock impersonation that I did with an art class. I actually teach a humanities class, and so I teach art, ironically, but not work with the visual arts other than photography. So I love, I'm nothing professional there, but I just love to capture nature, and I've done that well before that I started thinking about producing a written collection. So I think just thinking in terms of snapshots, of creatively, viewing the world as in many ways visually has led me to rethink my use of words on the page.
Well,
colors and all.
Speaking of your use of words on the page, I was reading through your book today, and there were some words in there that I'd never heard before. And anytime there are words that I've never heard before, I get really surprised, because I like language a lot, but you like language more than I do. So I was really pleased to see that there were words I'd never heard before.
Oh, that blesses me. Did it send you the dictionary? Because Emily Dickinson did back in the day.
Of course. I mean, they were mostly adjectives, but I'd never been exposed to them in casual conversation or written context. So I was like, man, I felt like I learned something today while I was flipping through your book.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. I
think, and I always have considered you, and now having had the blessing to listen to these podcasts, someone who's very articulate. So to do that.
I try real hard.
So I play around with words, and I think just being able to find a word that it may not visually fit, but it fits. It's like I have played with mosaics too.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool art form. It's tough, but I see that writing poetry, often it feels like words are coming together, because you don't tell it with poetry. It's so abbreviated. Even though I have a poem or two that feel kind of like ballads, because they tell stories. But a lot of my poems are just, loose phrases that capture some kind of internal thought. And I think even visual artists do that too. You're capturing the landscape of the mind and the spirit. And so to try to fit the words together, and there's no perfect way. It's just the way the artist does it.
Well, you also structure a lot of your poems in ways that, if they're read with, I believe, your intent, the way they're written, they're paced, and they inform you on the pace and order of which to read it. And I think that's really neat too, because it's more of an unwritten set of directions that you see on the page as you go through reading it.
Wow. What a cool perception.
Well, it feels
really
like
cool.
There's a pace and a rhythm to some of the passages because of how you've structured it grammatically. And I can pick that up. I don't know if I'm putting it in there myself, but I feel like it was purposeful just due to how it worked.
Yeah. And so the whole collection, Trailing the Azimuth, is about that whole, keeping up a pace through literal forest and landscapes, but also those other more complex ones that happen within.
So I'm halfway through the book right now.
Yay!
I have difficulties reading just in general, so I have to read in spurts before I just end up following my eyes across this page and not really thinking about what I'm looking at. But I read a good bit of it, and the one image that sticks out to me is quilted hills. That was in the very front of the book, and it instantly put an image in my mind that was very indicative of the passage itself overall. And I was like, man, that's in my head now, and it's not going to go away until I paint it. And I know, this is a peaceful image, but I know it's not going to bug the crap out of me until I paint it. But it's definitely going to be a thing.
You haven't started it yet.
No, it's not.
Will you please show it to me?
I know exactly what it's going to look like when it's done. Like it instantly, I knew what it was when I read those words.
I love that and that's one of the things that I thrived on accomplishing, and I've had a reviewer or two to see that these poems are anchored in place. But viewing Hancock County or anywhere we are, but living in Appalachia,
right,
as we pronounce it here, Appalachia, not Appalachia. I have thinking, how do I put in words what we have around us all the time, what we take for granted?
Yeah. And
so my grandmother was a quilter, and I was thinking about, the perfect imperfection of these mountains here. And so the quilting, it's just the pieces of who we are as a people that comes together. So I want to see that.
I will certainly show you.
That.
Don't worry, you will probably be one of the first people to see it. But it instantly conjured that image of looking across the valley, and you see the dense treetops like in late spring, early summer, and it just looks textile in nature, because there's texture to the leaves, and all the leaves are different, and there's just such a variety of visually stimulating things on the hillside if you were to just look out over the treetops and the rolling hills and the textures from the trees and all that. Like it's an organic blanket.
Oh, I love that.
Over the hills,
I think I'm going to steal that for a new poem.
Okay, go.
Organic blanket. Yeah. But really, and there's more where that came from when you get into some more poems, and I'm in the process of even writing more.
You heard it here first.
Heard it here first. Haven't named it yet, but it's in the making. But I think, like you're talking about the textures and the hues and the play of light and all of that. I think sometimes we don't stop to pause and look at those things. So, wow, kudos here. I was in a gallery not long ago in a library where I saw that people were representing our region in all kind of cool ways, but you can't get beyond at least once in your life, doing the hills. So quilted hills. Have you done landscapes with mountain scenes before? I
have, and I've done one, and so a lot of my artwork I would classify as psychedelic, because it's so removed and abstract from concrete things that you and I see on a daily basis. So I'm trying to bring that more into the surrealist spectrum by actually adding in elements of things that we would interact with in our daily life. Yeah. So I did a surrealist sunset, and it took me a hot minute to finish it because I got the landscape done and the sky and everything finished, but the sun itself, the sunbeams that were actually sitting behind, going down behind the mountains and whatnot, took me forever. Like 3 months. I just woke up one day after I'd painted 99% of the painting, and I was just like, all right, this is what it's going to look like. I finally figured it out. 3 months ago when I started this thing, it would have been a really good time to have this idea, but, I have it now. And I woke up, spent 2 hours making it happen, and then the painting was done, and my sister owns it.
Oh, does she?
She's got the first ever, surrealist piece I've ever done like that. So it's hanging in her house somewhere.
I love that. Well, I'll have to have her to send me.
Yeah, you can bug her about it. She would love to share it.
I love surrealism though, and I love Salvador Dali. And one of my poems, as you'll see later on, it's in the pandemic section, that last section of the book, where I'm just having a conversation with a surrealist artist because I felt like to try to paint or to put in words what the times we're living in is sort of surreal.
Well,
So I think we're living in a time for surrealism.
it is definitely surreal because there's so much that is exaggerated in a way that is just beyond the way you think it would be exaggerated. And I enjoy that from just how wild can reality get sort of thing. But, you know, it's an overarching conflict, you know, that we all have to deal with as a circumstance in society. So if it was somehow excluded from somebody's artistic expression, it would be really odd to see that as a vacuum, considering we're all experiencing it.
Yeah, that's a good way. There's an article in that, or a whole new podcast.
Oh man, I feel like you get stitched together already. Like, this is episode 32. Yeah, 32. I edited 31 today, so it'll be up soon. But out of the clips like that from all the other episodes, I think that could be an episode all by itself if I cared to chop that together.
And I have another cool one, is that somebody interviews you, but I imagine that you end up you resonate with
I get
the
questions.
Art.
Yeah. You know, I'm generally here to highlight the guest, but you know, sometimes they're just like, all right, enough about me. What about you? And it happens, and it's fine. I like it. But, you know, I try not to talk about myself a whole lot unless it's, like, in direct relation to whatever's happening in the conversation at the time. But, yeah, people do it. I've had it. It certainly happens. You'll catch it every now and again. Yeah.
Well, you're a good listener, too, and you try to draw out the creativity of the artist. I've listened to so many of those podcasts, so I'd say don't stop anytime soon.
Well, you know, me being the creative person myself, I really try to get to the hows and the whys, because the hows are like the physical workflow part, you know, the actual doing of the art, whatever it is. And then the whys are, you know, everything that happens behind your fingertips. Yeah. And I really enjoy both aspects. So the flip sides of that coin, I'm both entertained by, because I'm entertained by them, you know, in my own self. So I like to find that and everything in between for other people too. Like, everybody has a finesse that they've learned and become accustomed to in their medium, and I like figuring out where that is for some particular person. Like, you know, carpenters get into a groove, musicians get into a groove. Like, wherever anybody's, like, catharsis or, you know, that zen moment when they're really neck deep into whatever it is that they're doing. Yeah. You know, some people don't get that, and it's fine, but some people do, and I like knowing both sides of that coin, too, because it's relevant to my artistic experience. So there's a lot of little folds and nooks and crannies in everybody's artistic expression where there's fun room to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's nice.
And art doesn't fit in a box.
No.
And you know what's really cool about what you're doing is that you keep that definition of an artist, you know.
Really loose.
Loose, and the diversity of the types of people and the mediums. And, you know, I'm so happy to be included.
Being a painter myself, I would get bored after talking to like 200 painters, I guess. I mean, creativity is a loose term all by itself. How dare I try to rein it in to fit whatever definition I'm trying to make it be? That's too hard. I'll take the energy and let it go where it needs to go versus trying to, you know, cage this thing in.
You'll just throw an organic blanket over.
Yeah, I'll just throw an organic blanket over it. It'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, I get to meet all sorts of people that way. If I didn't have such a loose definition of it, I wouldn't have, you know, the variety of conversations that I have, you know. I've interviewed a lot of musicians and artists, but I've also interviewed martial arts instructors and all kinds of stuff.
Cool. I missed that one.
Hopefully I'll be able to get a professional race car driver on here at some point in the future, because I got one and he's already agreed to it. So maybe that'll work out. But there's, you know, the term is loose, and I like for it to encompass a lot of people in their expression, because that's, you know, variety is nice.
Yeah, and you've done songwriters and musicians, but this is your first time interviewing
I've not interviewed an author yet, or a poet. Which term do you prefer?
I actually, I'm a poet now because of that publication, but I actually, author is great, because I'm actually envisioning a novel. There's a novel in the bag. I've actually started working on a little bit, but yeah. Call me a poet, call me an author, call me a writer.
Have you written any sort of formal publications, like instructionals, anything informational?
I have, sort of. I think I had it out because I was rereading this. I wrote this.
So you have other written things.
This Teachers Teaching Nonviolence, I was a co-editor, and I've written like the section overviews and also a chapter. But I worked, and it's very, you know, pedagogical for teachers.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's also geared to bringing more awareness to how we live lives that are more nonviolent. And so that is, it's cool too. It's different. That's my instructional thing, because
Right.
I've been a teacher for so long. I've done a few blogs. I have a blog on my web page.
Well, you can share it if you want.
My web page is, yes, go to danitadodson.com. And I do have a section on nonviolence. I have a section on curriculum. I've written my instructional how-tos for, Spanish lesson plans or other types of lesson plans. But, I've written poetry, though, for quite some time, ever since I was, I guess, a kid in high school.
Well, what were you writing about in high school? Can you remember?
Now probably in one of those filing cabinets. I had got my old journals, and during the pandemic times, I found myself just revisiting. I think we all sort of got, as part of the surrealism, started getting, where have I been? What have been the waves of my life? And so I found some things I had written, but somewhere in that old journal as a high schooler, I talked about wanting to be a poet, wanting to get published, and I thought I owe it to that child to keep that promise.
Because child, you really wanted that enough to write about it and put it down.
Yeah. So I was doing things with nature, and I kind of surprised me, because I was a bookworm. I've always been around books and stuff, and I'd rather just sit in a room and read. But also, as I got older and older and older, started noticing the quilted hills more and more. But it surprised me when I went back and thinking I was writing about nature and history of my people and the landscape for a while. So,
So those themes have been present in your output for a while.
Yeah, they have been. They have
in some form or fashion.
Some form or fashion, right? I think writers and artists, I'm sure too. There's different ways that a sense of place, where we are at this moment, or where we've been. There's a sense of place that has its way working itself into what you create. Yeah. At least for me.
Or making spaces.
To create spaces.
Yeah.
And a lot of my work is, and you will really be able to relate to this as a surrealist, lateral approaches and things. That's a Spanish teacher in me too. And having traveled, there's a lot of that traveling, saying, okay, if I appreciate my own place and I write about my own place, recognize it for its problems and also for its beauty, then I can honor those other places and spaces. And so a lot of those other spaces have found their ways into my work too.
Well, it would be hard to exclude them. I mean, you're well traveled. It would be hard not to, digest that influence into whatever it is you're doing at the time.
Right.
I couldn't imagine, leaving some of my life experience out of my work. As grandiose as that sounds, it would be hard just to, block off a bit of your brain and just say, no, not going to use you for this one, and just leave it over there.
Because you're multifaceted too. I see you that way from,
Yeah, well, it's if you can take your appreciation from, slot A and put it in slot B and discover all the same things you like about place 1 and place 2, then there's no reason to not have both of those be influence on you, especially if you garner the same appreciation for them and you hold them highly in regard.
So beautifully said.
It would be really hard for me to ignore the influences on me. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
The travel helps. Travel helps a lot. And I'm pleased to see someone that calls here home well-traveled, because a lot of people get here and they stay here or don't go very far. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's always something to be said for travel and experience. Right. I think it helps a person grow. Yeah. There's and I felt like also just revisiting journals or snippets. I have lots of little snippets, but it's just like, and photographs too. Mm-hmm. Talk to you about that. And being able to, because we could never totally go back to where, to a memory or an experience or an emotion, but we see it through a lens. Mm-hmm. And so if I find snippets of words that I've recorded at some point in my life,
in my travels or just, sitting around on the porch. It was pretty cool to, to bring those out and start saying, okay, how can I splash some paint onto them?
Yeah.
How can I make the landscape of what was the past, what woven into to who I am now?
I think I use the term lens a lot as a metaphorical term to choose whatever angle I want on what's on my mind. The lateral thinking, like you mentioned a minute ago, is a big part of how I like to think through the images that need to bust out of my fingertips.
Wow.
Because sometimes they just are so ornery that I just have to draw them. But yeah, what would it be if I looked at it from over here? Literally, metaphorically, what would it be if I looked at it from this? Like if I was a person experiencing that at the time, how would that feel? And even sometimes that's literal because I'll have an image in my head. And I'm like, well, what if I shifted the perspective like 30 degrees that way and I look at the shape from a different literal point of view in my brain as I imagine it? And it works. It's a helpful tool to have in the toolkit of thought experiments in the context of creative expression.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love your words. I'm glad this is all audio tape so I can go back and listen and use them in some form or fashion.
I like talking.
This interview was a long time in happening. I'm so glad we got to do it. I had to write a book to get to.
Yeah, I had to write a book. I mean, even without the book, I have to appreciate the impact you had on my life because in your teaching career, if I can take my small vantage point on it and expand,
cool.
You, what you showed me most was learning to learn. Obviously, the context was the Spanish language, but that what you gave to me as a student was that you should learn because learning's fun and you can't, there's no stop to it. The sense of adventure in learning is really important to me.
Wow.
And you helped instill that sense into me in some degree, and I'm really appreciative of it.
Bless you for sharing that.
Well, you're welcome.
And bless you for seeing that.
But it needs to be said, and I, like I said, I do really appreciate it. So I was, paying attention in class.
I know you were. You had too much fun. People who have fun in class, I always know, are absorbing things, and in their own way. Yeah. Yeah. You were never. I don't think you ever slept in class.
Not in that class. There were other classes for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you will see that you're already probably applying these things to Elliot's life too.
Oh yeah. I try very hard to help him with the parts of him that are parts of me.
Oh, you see them.
Oh, yeah. So I can help him have less of a hard time figuring out how to work with or around those things. That's been a fun / odd, very surreal experience as a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to. When people ask me what being a dad is like, I usually tell them it's the most psychedelic experience I've ever had, and I've done a few drugs because it really is. But it's more psychedelic because of how grounded it is and how abstract it can be between you and the mini you, and everything's perfect.
Yeah.
So it's
you
a
get
lot of fun.
it.
Yeah. Somehow. Except for the times when somebody else asked me what he said, he can talk pretty well now. He's 6, but when he was a smaller child, and this happens, I think, for everybody's smaller child. Like, what do they say? I don't know. And they look at you as their parent, like, I don't know.
You didn't translate it.
But any other time you would know, and you wouldn't even have to think about it. It would just,
it's it's sort of like a language that you share that.
Yep, and I've got him talking about his dreams now, which has been really, really cool.
That's neat.
That's been something I've been really on him about. Hey, if you have a dream, I want to hear about it. So he tells me about dreams now.
I don't hear that in parenting, and that's a really neat. I think we don't do that enough now as adults.
His mom and I we work together really well, and I've always told her, I want to know what's going on inside his head. When he can talk, it'll be great. When we learn to talk really well to one another, it'll be great. And then I was like, well, once that's good, we're going to start talking about dreams. And I do pretty well with mine in a sense that I can remember them and pay attention to them and try to analyze them for my own self if I feel the need. But I want to know what's in this 6-year-old's brain at night when he's asleep. And he's told me that He's dreamed about feeding alligators lollipops and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow.
It's
Now,
absolutely
there's you a
ridiculous, and I love
pain
it.
in. But you think about the creativity that's nurtured.
Oh,
when we talk about
there are no
things.
reins on his brain because he's 6. Like he hasn't found the limitations yet that we currently are saddled with.
Yeah.
So when he goes to sleep at night, who knows what's going to go through his mind? So I just have to bug him about it if he remembers and is willing to speak on it.
I think you owe him that alligator with a lollipop surreal painting.
He actually told me that one when he woke up from a nap in the car one day, and that was one of those in-car conversations, and he had me rolling.
Never a dull moment.
The boy is wild. I love him to death. But reins in one's creative process. I usually like to ask people if they have any demons in their creative processes, because this has been a question that came up last December when I did the anniversary show for my first year of podcasting with some good friends of mine, and 2 of them are musicians. One's a sound guy, the other one's a musician and a painter. So the 4 of us all kind of run in a very similar circle. We're all really good friends, and we started talking about the things that really are the hitch in our giddy up in our workflow.
Yeah.
So do you have any of those?
Wow. I know we all do.
Yeah.
And now what things that comes to my mind first. So I think if I'm in a chair where there's like reading a Rorschach ink blot test, what do you see first?
Right.
Thing that comes to me is this sense of perfectionism. Not that I'm a perfectionist, but I have this little thing sitting on my shoulder. Mm-hmm. Call him the Diablo or whatever. That's saying, it's not there. That's not right. That's not that right. And that second guess, you can either do one or 2 things. You can give in and I've been to that point saying, nobody's going to read this. This is junk. Or keep going.
Right.
There's the word you want. And I'm thinking that word's too wild. No, you want that word. So I think it's listen to that voice that cuts against the grain, but it is that perfectionism of that, and they'll get to a point. I don't know if you're this way. Sometimes it's hard to release and let go of the creative piece, like sending it off to the publisher. When I got accepted, it was still in raw form, but raw for me.
Right.
And so I said, they said, when can this be ready? And I said, 3 months.
Oh God.
Oh gosh. 3 months. I will give 3 months. And then I got thinking, that's a lot of time. And it wasn't for that, little demon on my shoulder.
Right.
That little so I don't know. Yeah, you oohed and awed there when I said perfectionism. Do you see that?
I suffer from perfectionism in a very literal sense, because a lot of what I make for me, like any of the psychedelic geometric mandala style artwork I do,
wow.
I don't do it to sell it. I do it for me because it's a headspace and a process and something that's healthful for me to do. So I don't run around and murder people.
Yeah. It's an outlet.
It's definitely an outlet for all the energy that doesn't go into my professional life, or isn't. It's just all the stuff bouncing around inside my head, and it comes out of my fingertips as best as I can make it through this process. It just so happens people enjoy it that aren't me. But these things being a mix between technical and organic really bug me in a way that these things can be very flowy and feminine and dots and curves and no straight lines and all this stuff. And there's no real way to judge how accurate it is unless you know the bones of the structure that are under this design. And since I do, because I'm the guy that drew them, I was standing there with the compass and the ruler and, the pencil, I know whose lead is an exact diameter, so I know what degree of play I have in my lines themselves. When I look at something and it's a millimeter or 2 off where I thought it should be when I make that brush stroke, I know it and I have to struggle with it. And it's even worse when I mess up and drop the paintbrush on the... And now you've got this dot of color or a streak of color that you've got to repeat 7 more times, 12 more times, 17 more times. How did you set your stuff up to begin with? How many segments are you going to have? Or are you going to further subdivide it because where this landed? I could really go all day about how I could pick this apart. so on the flip side of that, it's also like, what do? Do I start over? Do I clean that spot on the canvas and ruin the background in that spot and then have to cover it some other way somehow? Because I do a lot of textured backgrounds or like powdered, like my powdered glow pigment. I dust that on a lot of my background colors to have like that spacey particle cloud kind of look to the background. That's really dynamic, never the same twice kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if I just like scrub that or clean it or something, I ruin that organic pattern that's right there. So I got to figure out what to do with that whole spot now. So, sometimes I've just had to accept that this is a great place to stop and call this one done and paint it over and carry on with the second iteration of this piece that is the picture I'm trying to create. Or I'll just say, screw it and run with it and do the thing the rest of the way around the design.
I have done all three of those in poems too.
Yeah,
right?
You have to.
Yeah.
You find those spots where you're forced to make a decision in whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think when we think of creativity just sort of globally, or we teach creativity or use of imagination, those are generally not something that we even think about, even have dialogues about until you're in the down in the trenches.
You're in it. But because it's not because making those hard calls isn't a concrete thing until you're in the process. Like, obviously, there are decisions along the way that need to be made through this process, but what are they and when do you make them is up in the air because you don't know, because you're not in the middle of it.
Right.
That you can only make those decisions at that time because those are the ones right in front of you in the process.
The water doesn't run over the bridge the same way.
No, twice, never. So, that's just one of those things that is less romanticized, I guess, about the creative process.
Yeah. So it sounds like we share that same sort of.
When I'm doing more abstract things that aren't so, symmetrical, by the force of myself and just the design in any way, it's a lot easier to throw stuff on the canvas.
To know that it doesn't have to fit a mold.
Yeah, I draw the bones. I call them the bones because it's more fun to say. But, just the bare geometric structure that I've planned for the thing. And then I'll elaborate on top of that.
Right.
In whatever free-form way I feel like. But if I just have a picture in my head that I need to get out, there's way less structure on it to begin with.
Yeah.
So I just, it's on the canvas now. Like, I'll take whatever brush is closest at hand and I know the colors I want and I'll just go. And it's one of the things I'm doing with the current series I'm working on. Like, just trying to put words and visuals to frustrating parts of society that affect the general person. So that's where I'm at right now.
And that's important.
Yeah,
okay.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. I can't remember whose quote this is accredited to, but an artist's job is to be a mirror of society.
Oh yeah.
And I haven't been doing a whole lot of that. It's more a mirror of my own self. It's what's going on inside my head. So this is a reflective mirror to society for this series. Well, it'd be nice.
I'm glad that you're doing that. Two things to add, just that resonates with me. A similarly approaching my new collection is going to be hopefully more ecologically aware. I think people are not facing the troubles of climate change and environmental injustices and environmental racism and things like that. So I'm like you. I'm waking up and trying to mirror some things. I'm also having my humanities students, when my class that I teach for Walter State is arts. It's an introduction to arts and culture. So ironically, I don't do graphic visual arts, but I'm teaching art. But I have my students to create their finale project and respond into the times we live in. Troubled times, which there's just so much in the world, Well, but to try to mirror society and finding a way, and they're freaking out, saying, "Okay, what's
where do I pick? Where do I start?
Where do I start? And what medium do I start with?" So I might have anything from a song to a visual painting, but I think we owe it to ourselves to turn that mirror back somehow in the ways that we can do it.
Yeah, this is probably the body of work that I've got that I'm most emotionally invested in, and then is also the most reflective of society in general. So this will be a fun series. I've got one piece done, one piece halfway done. There's at least going to be 3 because I feel like there's one more in there.
Wow.
But we'll see what happens.
Do you care to share what you reflected?
I've posted one of them, and it's just a list of crises. The pieces themselves are so far entitled, but the theme of the body of work is the consequence or the circumstances of society that we participate in, but also have no control over. The first painting with the really wonky smiley face was about all the global crises that are, we are subject to right now, whether it comes from wealth inequality or inaccess to medical need or, housing crisis, environmental crisis, the current pandemic, they're all listed there, but they're written in such a way that the actual word itself is obscured, so you won't really see it unless you're paying attention. But the main focal point of the image is this really upset, sick-looking smiley face that has a message of, we're really supposed to be okay with this kind of thing. So that's the main focal point. And then when you look past that, it's all the list of things. So in red paint on a black background with a yellow smiley face, it's very deliberate to draw the attention. The second one is about my life experience as a productive member of society and feeling undervalued by society. Yeah. So this piece actually has a name, The Weight of All the Things I Cannot Afford.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's a list of literally everything that is a normal, everyday tax of society, not like literal taxes, but a thing you must pay or own up to as a member of society to participate in society, whether that be your cell phone bill or major car repairs or, like house payments or like all the things that are, it's mostly monetary, but
which are getting bigger and as we go on.
So this smiley face image that's upset and sort of sickly looking is the touch point. It's the human point of view, the viewer's point of view. So that's going to be very small and at the bottom under a pile of all these things, but it's all blue, so it's like you're at the bottom of the ocean.
Wow. So you got those posted on...
I've got the first one posted. The second one is in process. The weight of all the things I can't afford is halfway done. I need to put the list and the face on there, and then it's good to go. But I just haven't decided how picky I'm going to be about these darn words. So the perfectionist in me, like I have the idea, but having the tools to execute it, I'm being very picky about.
I love that you're fusing words with.
Well, normally I don't because the things I do are so abstract and they're just words don't fit that context. But there are, in this case, when it's so many tangible things, the word instead of an image representing that thing is equally as powerful, in my opinion. So I don't have to paint a picture of a phone bill. I can just write the word phone bill and it carries the same weight in the way I'm trying to deliver it, in my opinion.
Yeah, people feel that. And it resonates some sort of reaation.
Because everybody knows what the word phone bill looks like. If I just paint an envelope,
it sounds like a poem too. You think about it sounds like a poem.
I'll let you say that. Yeah. You can say that. But yeah, these are pieces that have been on my mind, and I've tried to figure out the best way. I'm putting a lot of mental effort into them before I actually push them out of my fingertips. So they're very, very heady pieces of mine in the sense that they aren't very heady. Oh, wow. They're heady in the other extreme because I've thought about them a lot.
Yeah, and trying to find a way to make them materialize. You ever think about setting up a gallery or?
I am smack dab in the middle of curating a show in August that is a psychedelic showcase because Knoxville underserves its the more vivid side of its artistic subculture, and I'm trying to bring light to that. I've got 5 or 6, including myself, artists lined up for this show, and it's going to be a one-night big ordeal.
Let me know. I'd love to.
Trust me, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that Knoxville has a lot of great galleries, but none of these galleries, it seems like, have any interest in putting art like this out there.
The art from the subculture.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really great talent in Knoxville, but I feel like this is most underserved, and it also happens to be a lot of the art that I enjoy and some of the art that I actually produce. And as a producer of this style of art, it's been really, really hard to find spaces to cooperate with me to show this. Yeah. So
finding a venue and curating.
Yeah. So I found a brewery and a bar tap room that really like me and what I do and how I try to present things, and they're willing to let me run their space for a night and make a big psychedelic art showcase. So I'm gonna do it.
That sounds amazing. If you thought about what you're going to name it.
No. I don't want to obfuscate it at all. I want people to know that it's a psychedelic art show, and you're not going to see this anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it is.
It's going to sell itself.
It's going to be very blunt. Like if you're going to show up, expect to see some crazy stuff. Like, don't have any other ideas, because this is the stuff you're not going to see anywhere else around town.
I'm proud that you're young, you're getting a lot, you've done a lot in your short life, and you're not waiting till too late. I mean, you're supporting other people too.
Well, it's really easy to support myself. Well, that's a double-edged statement, but it's easy to cater to what I want to do. Like I want to cater to people that do similar stuff to what I do or different stuff, because rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
I don't have a reason to not share the spotlight with people that make similar art or art I enjoy. Like it would be very selfish of me to do the thing any other way, in my opinion, because I like a lot of the people around here that make art similar to me, and they're all cool people. They deserve a wall just as much as I do. Why can't we all share a wall together? I don't have a problem with that.
That's sounds like a bumper sticker. I like that. Like, why don't we share a wall?
I feel like I've said the word share a wall a lot the last couple of months. Lots of collaborative and curated stuff coming out of me this year.
Yeah, and I think artistic minds, creative minds, sometimes erroneously think in terms of competition. And how do I stack up against whatever, and it's cool to build a network with people who.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to quantify in any way better, best. I'd rather just stand beside people than on a podium because it's way more fun. I find that the people that make crazy art are usually pretty fun people, and knowing fun people is like kind of a really cool part of being alive. I like being alive, so I should know some cool people, right?
You're still a master with words.
Oh, stop! Nobody listens for these to listen to me talk. Come on.
Oh, well, you make us all look good and sound good, so.
I'm really good at making other people talk. That's the thing.
Yeah. You bring that. Well, there's that comfort there, and there's this receptivity that you just exude. So I think people feel comfortable sharing the wall with you.
I am genuinely curious, so that's why I ask. I wouldn't be wasting anybody's time if I wasn't genuinely curious. Like when I saw that you were going to get your book published, the first thing I thought of was like, oh God, I got to read this book. And then the second thought was, man, I really want to talk to her about how she wrote this book. Yeah. And luckily, I have the perfect avenue to do just that. Yeah. And so we're sitting here doing this thing.
We're doing it. And I'm so glad that you already begun to plunge into it. And I think poetry, people have shared with me about even approaching that book laterally, and that's pretty cool. It's almost, I think about a poetry collection it is organized, as you pointed out, and there's trails that lead to trails, but I still think it's a little bit like going into art gallery, and I remember going into a gallery in Boston and not knowing, oh my goodness, where do I start? Because there's so many rooms. Yeah. And just walking into one. Okay, where do I start? Okay. And maybe just splitting right down the middle of the room and starting here and just vibing it the way it feels comfortable. And a lot of people told me they approached the book that way, have just fallen into a poem, because you really can. It's just like viewing one.
I haven't seen you make any specific statement that you have to read it front to back either, because there's no there's a continuous theme, but there's no continuous like overarching story that goes through there. So you're not going to miss anything by just turning to page 35 and
I don't think you are. And the cool thing is people are texting me back, or they're calling me. I get a lot of Facebook messages that say, okay, I like the poem I found the coolest is such and such.
Yeah.
And one or two people have even said, well, I just flipped open what I came to, I read. And so I just think we fall into art the way we do. And a novel's different.
Yeah, there's a storyline that goes...
Yeah.
Or some kind of continuous thread that goes from cover to cover, but since this is a collection, I don't feel that that's as pertinent.
So I really feel a collection is just, it's pretty much like curating something. Yeah. And then you got, that's part of my deal. Because many of the poems, well, most of them were just creating just little vignettes, just like a painting on the wall. And then you have to find ways to work them together.
Yeah.
For those readers who want that. So I have, like 5 umbrellas that they're going to fit under. And then you have to figure out, okay, what order. And I end up really just laying the individual poems out on the floor, and
so you physically work this out.
I do physically do.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And I saw this new young writer. I don't know if you know Amanda Gorman, if you know anything about poetry. She actually was the inaugural poet. She spoke at President Biden's inauguration.
Oh, yes.
That young chick that wrote.
I saw that.
The Hill We Climb. Well, I'm reading her new book of poetry, and pretty much she was, and started becoming an instant fan. She's 24 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, she is going to write right now. Harvard degree, and graduated and said, I'm just going to write. I got everybody's attention on inauguration day.
And she's got a Harvard degree to fall back on, so there you go.
But what she was saying, and that's the only other person I've heard that does that, and I think every writer, every artist has different approaches. When you finally encapsulate something and say, oh, it's ready to be released, how do you get it in its...
To put it in the neat little box to hand it off.
Yeah, if it's got to go in a box,
Right, literal or metaphorical box.
So she had an Instagram post of where she's literally in this long hall putting out all her poems, and trying to figure out. And then there's this shuffling, okay, this poem actually would work better over here. So that's really been my approach. And I don't think I'm going to stop that.
Well, if it works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to feel like it fits somewhere, And I almost feels like the most in poetry, as opposed to my longer work like a novel. There's so much in between, so much there's going to be fillers that the reader's going to bring in and say, okay, what's the mortar in between these things? How does it work together? You create your own meaning, but I still think the writer has to do a bit of that.
Well, how much did you do of that? The sort of, you put yourself in the reader's perspective about how the transition is from one to the other. Yeah. Did you do that between every poem, or wherever you felt you could? Wow.
I wanted it to have some sort of flow.
Yeah.
And if I was a travel guide, since this is supposed to be, a lot of the poems are written about literal trails, because I love to hike, but all kinds of symbolic trails. I had to think in terms of how the reader is going to find a flow through those paths. And I would even visualize people I know that are excited about the book or whatever, and saying, okay, now diversity, which I hoped to have, and it's proven to be that case. The people come back and tell me they've read the book. How are different people are going to read? How about people who don't read poetry a lot? Right. How's this going to...
Me?
My nephew says the same thing. He's the one, Caleb. Yeah. Remember Caleb? He gave me the idea for the title of the book. Of course, he didn't know.
Right, that was going to stick in your brain like that.
He just was home at Christmas, and he was chatting nonstop like he does about, gee, the toughest thing I ever did in our military has been try to do nav land nav
Yeah.
exercises, and you really have you start with a compass and a map, and they say you've got to get from point A to point Z. We don't tell you how. You got to figure it out.
Here's your tools. Go.
Here's your tools, and you have to have the tools, and you've got to look to the light. You know, one of the things. And I started waxing poetic, thinking, well, that's kind of what we're dealing with in these uncertain times. But he has since then. I even have a call out in the intro about the acknowledgments that he gave me that idea for the title.
I think it fits. It's a great title.
People are like, what is an azimuth? It's a Spanish word. No, it's not Spanish. But it might as well be foreign. But he's even said, in being a reader, a heavy reader, that reading poetry it's tougher.
Yeah.
Because you've got to, the reader has to be very active.
Yeah, it's very cerebral. You have to be involved.
Well, you do in art too when you're viewing something, right?
Most of the time.
I mean,
if you're really trying to look.
If you're really, but if you're just there, and not caring, you're probably just going to miss so much. Same thing here, but I think true people walk into an art show or into a poetry collection curious to find something.
Yeah. That
resonates with them. And so I once had an English professor, probably my first poetry professor at LMU, said poetry is 50%. When you read a poem, it's 50% what was the creator has willed, has given through his or her view. But the other half is left to the reader. And so I think art's that, we wouldn't all see your pain in the same way.
Right, and everybody brings whatever it is that they have to meet you in the middle because you put the thing they're looking at there in the first place.
Yeah.
And then they come to view it. So that's the middle.
And you're not going to have a lot of plaques that says, this is what I intend for your
right.
Right.
I don't really enjoy putting a lot of context on my pieces because sometimes there isn't and sometimes it's irrelevant. I very much enjoy letting them speak for themselves once they're on a wall.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoy seeing people see the things. I like watching people look at them. So I don't unless the context is blatantly obvious in the piece, you're never going to find me with a little paragraph on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper next to it. It's just
you're just going to be a fly on the wall when the show's going on.
Oh yeah, I'm always I'm there at my shows. I've only missed one of my art shows. And that was for some parental obligations that I couldn't make it. But I generally try to be at all my First Friday events and everything because they're a lot of fun. I like talking to people. When they see stuff and they yeah, he's sitting over there.
Yeah.
And they come up man, what was this? What? And I'm just listen, this is how it went down.
Do any people ever tell you they see something in what you've created that you would have never thought of?
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't in your mind and heart, but you're thinking, oh, that works.
Well, and see, a lot of the stuff that I make for my own self is so geometric or esoteric or whatever it may be that people often put a lot of their own onto the piece. And that it doesn't bother me at all because I'm making that image for me because it's tools and a process that I really enjoy being a part of. And, people say that I make sacred geometric artwork, but I don't say that because I will say I don't want to say that if I had to say any part about it is sacred to me, it's not the end result as the geometric piece of art. It's the creative process.
Oh, wow.
Because that's the part that I'm involved in. I'm not involved in the finished product. I'm involved in the making of the product. Oh. So if somebody looks at my work and says, hey, that's sacred geometry right there, I'm just going to look at it and be like, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't label my work like that anymore because if you have any kind of grandiose hierarchy of ideas, you can stick it on there because I don't want to.
That's an idea. And I think it's the process too.
Yeah, it's definitely the process. I sat down, I have all my paints, I have the brush or 3 that I want to use, and the next 1 to 4 hours is time for my brain and my hands to be the only things talking. And that's fine. I'll turn on music and just be quiet.
Yeah.
There are Sunday mornings that are good days for me to be creative, and I've said it a lot before, but I won't stop. I'll wake up at between 7:30 and 9 o'clock at any given time, and I'll just like go in my studio and shut the door and do what I need to do, and all of a sudden it's like 3 p.m. I'm hungry and I have a headache, and it's like, oh, I'm human. I need to go like do stuff about that. Drink water.
Yeah. I feel you.
Yeah.
I can sit down at this computer and just set aside some time, and it's just like before you know it, it's just you get caught up into it. It's something else just takes over.
Yeah, it's the you dialogue goes away and the creative thing just happens.
I like that. Yeah.
So what is a good creative day for you? Like, what's a good writing day or creative day for you?
Wow. I am so go with the flow and kind of lateral that it varies. It's going to vary. Sometimes it can be, sitting in 3-hour block, and it could be, okay, I've got an inspiration. I'm walking in the woods and the words keep coming to me. Maybe the whole thing, and I've got to rush back and get it down, and I've got it down in 20 minutes or whatever. But generally, I've got to have some contact with nature first, and I think I've got to think out of the box. I've got to, something large to come to me.
So you get out of the house.
I get out of the house.
Literally out of the house.
Yeah, I literally get out of the house. But I'm not one that keeps a notebook or a notepad, or I don't even think to have my phone with me where I could, record this or whatever. I've got to dash back.
My notepad is full of just all those little snippets of thoughts that are going to make something, or I'm going to remind myself to play with later.
Yeah. Well, and I have those generally, but I think I probably need a little knapsacks when I go to the woods, because that's where the greatest ideas come sometimes. I've just got to get back to a space and record those snippets.
Yeah.
So,
but the walk between the house and wherever you're at out in the woods, it could be a good spot to really let those things marinate in your brain for a hot minute.
Yeah. And but I believe in the snippets. I think things. I mean, because to record something that maybe nobody else, like Quilted Hills, maybe that's not been written anywhere else, and to say, oh my goodness, don't let me forget this. Till I get home, let it be here.
This just came to mind. I've got a good story on myself. I was asleep, or going to sleep, sometime last summer, and the partner at the time tried to talk to me, and I woke up. I just said something silly because I was half asleep. I said gourmet fences, and in my mind, gourmet fences. In my mind, I had this picture that just occurred to me as I was coming out of the half slumber that I was in, of just 8-foot tall privacy fence made out of bacon.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm gonna have to paint that at some point, and and the reason I bring this up is because that thought was 12, 14 months ago, and
it's still with you.
2 months ago my brain was here's the picture, dude. Yeah. And now I know what those words are translated into an image, so I'm going to have to paint a really Art Deco backyard privacy fence made out of bacon with all kinds of muted colors and pastels.
It's funny that 2 words. So you started with words.
That's because the thing that blurted out of my mouth, and then the image came second.
See, it's funny. It's funny. You got to trust the universe. I
don't know what made that blurt out of my mouth, but my half asleep brain was yeah, say that. That's great.
Gourmet fence.
Gourmet fences. So, bacon privacy fence. Here we go. But I finally figured it out, because that time to marinate in my brain was the length of time to give me the picture that I need to put on canvas now.
Yeah.
So there's, it took a long time. The picture had to sit in my brain for a while, but it figured itself out.
Yeah. And I think to allow that time for marination, because sometimes you can sit down, I can sit down and think, okay, I'm going to write today, and maybe not much will come, because I think you can't force those things. So that's why I think if I just kind of jar myself into that, little freaky zone, and sometimes that best comes when I'm just out here saying, okay, I'm just going to just be and whatever. I still think being in good health, feeling well, getting the blood flowing.
Yeah.
That, I don't know. I'll just say, and a lot of it's just the process, like you were talking about. Maybe the end result is not sacred. some people may read it that way, but the whole process itself is.
Well, that's the healthful part for the person creating it. Like that's the exercise. The finished product is just the finished product, but the exercise is the task of.
Yeah, and if there's no way to totally explain that to the viewers of the end result.
Right, but I could sit here and you could say making this and the process of making whatever it is was a healthful practice and a very cathartic for me, and actually doing it made me feel better as a person, or about being a person, or as someone that can just generate things. Yeah. But you don't know what that feels like for me, even though I told you with the words best fit that description. Like I used the most accurate words I could, but that still does not relay the information of how it felt.
There's no way.
Because, English isn't that kind of language.
Yeah. It isn't. And it's a tough one to deal with. That's why I throw a lot of foreign words too. They seem to, in some ways, have a flow that English can't capture. But
I think the word I looked up first today was lurid.
Lurid.
I think. Yeah. Very, very colorful, textured things. And I was like, man, how have I never heard that before?
Because that seems like a Thomas word.
Well, it describes something colorful, the physical appearance of a thing or a group of things. And I was like, how has this word avoided me my whole life?
It just sounds, and now you're going to pop it into a conversation.
It's going to be, I'm going to read it somewhere next week and like, wow.
Now it's come back to me.
Right, exactly.
You've got to.
Now I'll see it everywhere now that I never saw it before today. Do you have any other good ways to get into your headspace about being creative and doing the thing that you do? When you take a walk in the woods, you don't listen to music or do any of that?
I love music. I love Americana, folk, that kind of music. But that's usually just if I want to do that before I create or something. Yeah. I might have some new age, Zen kind of music in the background occasionally, something like that, but not too often. I like silence. Okay. Because I think the world is it's too busy sometimes, and so I try to see a blank space, even though I don't want to create writer's block or anything. I won't allow, but I do have to have a cup of hot tea or coffee, something like that, something that's comforting. Right. Occasionally a candle, there. I like my color around me, that I like having lurid images around and reminders, because generally when everything gets done, occasionally I'll take my computer outside. I do jot a lot of things in notebooks, which I've done all my life, but now I've gotten really comfortable about just feeling it, just typing it. I like the music
as it hits your brain,
as the musicality of it, and then saying, and there I can play with the words that fit. It's sort of like you talking about playing with, having to paint over something or whatever, which I don't scratch it out. I don't have to scratch it out like I would in a notebook. So I can play around and say, okay, this just sort of feels.
So that workflow is fluid enough for how you think about it to keep up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But then again, that little perfectionist
the whole time
that's up there is saying, sometimes it says take a space, shut this for a minute and, come back. But being in this room, and that's why I invited you here, is there's a lot of reminders just looking at without even calling out a particular one.
I don't think we said yet that we're in your studio.
Oh, you're in my studio.
Yeah, we're in the studio. Privileged to be here in this workspace.
Yeah, and I have books that I've collected. Yeah. And I like art too, so I have some of my favorite artists here too.
There are lots of picture frames on this bookshelf.
Picture frames, which you probably don't see on a lot of
people's bookshelves. No, it's usually just books.
Yeah, so I have Picasso, who I love, and Frida Kahlo, and Dali, and I'm not sure who that is, but I think it's about muses, whenever, and all these are kind of reminders that people throughout time have created, and they've gone through the challenges. Mm-hmm. That I can be true and I can be authentic and I can create. I can be from Hancock County. I don't have to tell myself you can't do this. Right. So I think some people sell themselves short. and they think, they're living in a space where creativity doesn't happen. It can and it does happen.
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you specifically, and then, Rick Campbell as well also, came on the heels of that idea, because I may not know everything that goes on in this place, but I do know for sure that I'm not the only creative person that's come out of this place.
No.
So, I'd like to talk to those people. So it works out. I had like almost a 3-hour conversation with Ashton, and that was a great time.
I love that, and he's doing so well.
He is. I'm super proud of him. Every time he posts a new show he got booked, I'm just like, fist in the air, go get him, bud. But yeah, he and I had a really good conversation about what it's like going and doing, and then coming back, and then going and doing some more. It was a good conversation for both of us to have, because we're in very similar places in our creative journeys.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until we had that conversation, so that was nice.
Well, I see you as kindred spirits too. I mean, I think
he and I are the same kind of just absolutely ridiculous.
He shoots me over something every now and then and say, "This is a raw, unrecorded version of the song." I mean, it's just he, and then it ends up on an album later because and he was one of the first to reach out and say, "The world needs more poetic love."
Yeah, for sure.
More things that are art. That's what I need to find the message. It didn't say. I think it said art. We need to keep creating art.
He's always been super supportive of me, and I've always been super supportive of him. It's great to see another Sneakvillian out there kicking ass and taking names, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and you're in spots, you're in areas where you're able to build a network, but you're also able to come back in here and show people what can be done, what has been done. I would love for you to sometime happen into our new coffee house, a gathering place.
I saw you post about it. I definitely want to check it out.
It has inside there. There's some. It's half of it is a cooperative, and has some creations. I mean, different mediums of art there. And it's not very big, in consideration to what you might see in Knoxville or Nashville or somewhere, but just to be interested to see what's there from your perspective.
Yeah, check out the spaces.
So things are happening here that people are starting, even on a small level, to recognize that we can create. We have. I know Rick was.
If not now, when?
If not now, when? It was like Rick was chatting with you last weekend. We've had Jimmy Martin, the biggest, hero trailblazer in bluegrass music.
The path he made, everybody walks.
Yeah, they all do. You cannot walk it without it
right.
having and then you have the celeb, Morgan Wallen, who is just a guy from down the road. And,
he's doing what he can.
Yeah, he's doing what he can, and we all find our niches, but we've got to all support each other. And
well, it's this whole ordeal came about neck deep in the pandemic. I was just like, man, nobody's going to First Friday shows. Nobody's out in town seeing art. How can I help expose the public to the people around them that are creating things that may or may not be how they make their living, but there's no reason not to help people expose themselves to the beauty around them. So, if I'm going to be really heady about it, that's the reason I wanted to start this thing, to give people a platform to start a dialogue with the creative subculture around town. And so far, it's been going okay, I guess.
Yeah, you keep sharing, keep doing that. Do you think more people have turned to creativity as a therapeutic way to deal with these times, or?
I would say so, and I would say not a lot of people have shared. Now, in my life experience, the last 2.5 years or so, I can tell you that I know several people that have done something creative as an outlet for friction or tension or whatever it may be, and I will always advocate for that. Some outlet, whatever it may be. But yeah, I've seen people pick up a paintbrush. I've seen people start writing songs. Like I've seen people do all sorts of stuff. A buddy of mine started a band, and now they play around town sometimes. They do, and it has happened, and they continue to do, and I'm really happy about it because 2 years ago, outside of this context, they wouldn't have done and didn't do, and now they're doing and continue to do so. So it's really cool to watch them get out there and do the thing, regardless of the context that brought that to life. It's more beneficial now to them creating as the people that they are versus, you know, the circumstances that kept them from it or didn't realize then that they could or whatever it was. Whatever the block was then, it's been removed and they're doing the thing now, and it's great.
Triumph has risen from tragedy.
Yeah. I just wanted space for people to explore and find stuff and maybe find their next new favorite local artist and, you know, hang something in their house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's working out so far. People tell me they listen, so it's all right.
They do, and we're going to keep sharing that with others, and we're glad that you came to Hancock County.
Well, like I told you when we rescheduled a couple weeks ago, like it would be foolish of me to ignore the people that influenced me directly or indirectly, you know, becoming the person that I am, and. You know, there were a few very influential people to me in school, and you were one of them, so it would be foolish of me to act like you weren't there, and to not put you on the other side of this microphone would be a disservice to not only my creative efforts as who I am, being, you know, living my life experience as yours and I's intertwined, but you know, it wouldn't do me any service, wouldn't do you any service. Like it would be foolish for us to not. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. Thank you.
If there's a platform to be shared, such as this, I mean, I might as well share it. I don't want to be the only person you hear on this thing ever. I mean, like, there have been small episodes where it's just like a short snippet. Hey, everybody, this is what's going on. But like that's not why I do this.
Do you like really sit it down and explode in the conversation? I mean, tapping into
because like I said earlier, I know my housing wise. I really want to figure out the other person's housing wise because you got them, and if you didn't do something, you wouldn't have them.
Right.
But they're innately mutual to the thing that is being done. And if I discover that you know the housing wise and have figured out all the finesse, then great. We'll talk about every bit of it. And, you know, sometimes I've had people just go, I don't know, you know, I just do it. And it happens and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's the logic. Let's go. And, you know, roll with that as the conversation because they don't have to be really well thought out points of view or well analyzed or well structured answers. Like, I just want the blunt truth about how it is and why it is you do what you do. Like, I'll even ask people why they use certain softwares or why they use certain tools or why they use that color. Like, I try to go that far into it if I can or if I see that they have themselves. Yeah. Like, I want to know the logic. So, everybody does things differently too. Right. Because, you know, your creative process is different from other writers' creative process. Obviously, a lot of writers chain smoke cigarettes and cigars. You don't do that. Don't do that. Most we can is you know, a warm cup of tea. Right. So, you know, you're not subject to that vice. So that makes your workflow different. And, you know, everybody has their own unique way of doing what you do. And even if it's a very regimented formal process like screen printing. Like, I know guys that make screen printing art and they make art that you would never guess is screen printed just because of how it looks. But they do the same process every other screen printer uses. But they have something so unique at the end of it that is uniquely theirs and can only be theirs because they understand the process and know how to manipulate the process because they've taken the time to learn that finesse that they need to create their art. Their art. I like that. But everybody knows how screen printing works if you screen print. Yeah. But he does his thing and they do their thing and everybody in between does their thing as well. So, and that's probably the case for any medium or any art that way. I did a class. I spoke to a high school class in Oregon about 6 weeks ago, and they had me to talk about the book a little bit and, you know, share a poem or whatever. The teacher then opened up the floor to the students ask questions, and I was thrown this question from a kid was, what is the meaning of life? And I'm thinking, oh no, I froze. I got everything else about, do you have form? What is the meaning of life? And I'm thinking, okay,
he needs an answer
He
from somebody.
asked. He asked. He needs an answer.
He needs an answer. But what I came with, I thought, it's almost like you asking me, what is the demon? I thought, you got to trust the first thing that comes up. It's this sort of like, it's what the universe sends you as an answer. And it was a little bit like what you said a few minutes ago, is that the meaning of life is to find the thing that you need to say in the way that you need to say it to represent the authenticity of who you are.
That's a really good answer. I like that one.
Well, it just came. I hope it satisfied him. But that's just what you really said.
Yeah.
I think you have your own spin on, and that's acceptance. If one is able to find that authenticity and say, okay, I'm willing to rawly share myself with the world, and it might not fit what everybody else expects. Mm-hmm. I bet you get that or think of that. Maybe somebody is expecting this not to be like any other art they've seen, or this volume's not going to read it like anything else they've read. But to say, okay, I was just authentic in my own voice. This is what I've been given, and this is my means of creating it.
Did that satisfy him? Did he walk away from the microphone?
Yeah, he said thank you.
Well, that's a lot. I feel like that's one of those questions you toss at somebody just to see what happens. Sometimes.
I think it was. I think they might have decided. I think
he figured he wanted that one, didn't he?
Yeah. But they might have talked as a class before. Somebody asked her, "What's the meaning of?" See me throw her.
Well, yeah. Let's put her on the spot real quick.
Kids, It's like flashback. I thought I've dealt with high schoolers before.
This feels familiar.
Sounds like something I have asked.
Right.
Write to me. But I think that's in heart what we're doing is we may not call it meaning, but when you create your, very unique work. You just described these 3 pieces that I'm just so excited about seeing that's a mirror to the world. Yeah, I'm excited
to see it too, trust me.
Yeah. But you're doing it, sounds to me like nothing I've seen before.
Well, the reason I'm doing it is because I haven't seen it. And I've said this a few times on the podcast, but especially lately, somehow this has been a theme that has come up. I can't trust anybody else to do the thing that I want to see because they can't read my mind. So if I want the thing to be exactly as I see it or as close to it as I can manifest, then I can't trust anybody else to do that. So I got to do it.
I know what you mean. I'm thinking about that. I'm reading novels. I love to read. And I'm thinking, I'm reading, it's just junk. I'm not appreciating these. How did it get to be a New York Times bestseller? And I'm thinking,
because some company bought 40,000 copies, and then they're going to donate it for a tax write-off.
And I'm thinking, you need to create that you want to read. So it's the same perspective. Yeah.
Well, I really firmly think that, since nobody else is inside my head, nobody else sees the pictures that I see that, I must force out of my fingertips sometimes.
And I think that's why we came into the world. If I can go back and backtrack, I would do an appendix to my meaning of life question is, I think we're all born to create in some way. And I think there are other cultures and time, if you study other societies and other cultures where people are apprentices to, everybody created in a society, or they told the stories of the people, to pass things on. And I don't know that our society, as a whole, appreciates.
I think we're so disconnected from the source of things, in the literal and metaphorical sense. The car I rode here today was made in Japan and came here on a boat. And I've never met the man or a series of people that put this thing together. I've never shaken a single one of their team. But you know what? I'd really like to. Yeah. But I can't. Yeah. Not as it sits right now without some serious effort. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing with history too. If I can slightly touch on politics of the day. Yeah. I think a lot of people lose tangible connections with the history or the source of the thing that it is that they're neck deep in, apparently these days. So it lends itself a lot to being obscured, when you can shake the hand of the person that made the thing that you use every day, there is a direct line of sight between you and where that thing came from. And that's a very beneficial relationship to have, no matter how shallow. Even if you meet them one time, say thank you, shake their hand, and then that's it. You split. You never see them or they never see you the rest of y'all's lives. Doesn't matter, because you shook the hand and you looked in the eyes of the person that did the thing. And that's why I strive to have handmade or crafted or whatever it is, in my life as much as possible. Because I want to foster those relationships between the end consumer and the start of the chain where this thing started. So if I can trace those things back as much as possible, I really try to.
I was in some workshop somewhere where someone had talked about doing a project with a class where they found a product and had the students to be able to trace it, and mainly small businesses, because you can do that more easily. But I'm thinking about that with food these days. Our food's just from everywhere.
Yeah, it's the logistics of the food chain here in the United States are absolutely ridiculous.
And our people, back in the day, we come from ancestors, farmers, on the land here. And
if you couldn't grow it on your 5 acres, then you probably didn't get it unless you bought it in town grown on somebody else's 5 acres.
Yeah. And you shook the hand of the man who grew it, right?
So, usually the person that grew it's the guy selling it at the market. And that's how it goes.
So that disconnection, I think that's what art and good creativity does, is tries to foster a reconnection in some way.
Like I said, I just enjoy knowing, like being able to shake the hand that made the thing. That just brings it full circle, because it's not a vague, like, oh, it's just somewhere out there in the ether. Like, you've met the person that has the thing. You know exactly, kind of exactly where that is. Like, it's in their home, and that's the person that takes care of the thing that you generated.
Right.
I take comfort in knowing that a lot of my pieces are in places where they are cared for and shown proudly, because I have some sort of relationship with the person that made it or ended up, buying or consuming the media somehow.
Right. And that's staying humble enough to connect with those people. I have loved and I encouraged it for people to reconnect with me and to say, okay, I want you to tell me, here's what you've read, here's what resonates with you, and to be able to talk to me about what they see. So it's like shaking somebody's hand, when you.
Well, people get the chance to do that too, because you've been doing some press for the book.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed that?
I have. That's the part I dreaded. That's the part some days it's still like pulling my hair out, because and self-promotion is just, it's just
a pain
not.
for everybody.
It is, and it doesn't feel natural to me, but it's, sometimes though people want that on the other end. They want to connect with, because they feel you are representing them in some form. Particularly here, people have been so good.
Oh, I bet.
My biggest support has come from my own hometown. People are like, you come from here. You're one of us.
Yeah.
We can do this too.
Right.
I said, go write your own, whatever. But being able to, So the press, the promotion, I thought just social media has just been I don't know what I'd have done without it, and I hate it sometimes.
Of course.
When people get mean and everything, but in this, not about my work, because I've not experienced anything but kindness, and I think that we can use those spaces as good spaces. But I wasn't sure how I would approach that, but being able to, just say, okay, here's where I am in the world. I'm at a bookstore, or I'm at a sign-in or whatever, and for some reason, people think that's so cool. Yeah. That there are people out there connecting with other people.
Yeah, for sure. I've never been to a book signing or a book reading, but I'm happy that they exist. And if at all possible, if I find an audiobook, if it fits the context, I like to hear the author read it.
Oh, yes.
Because they know how it's supposed to be read, because they wrote it. But, there's lots of times where that's not the most practical thing. But if I can find it, I usually try to listen to that over other versions. Yeah,
and a lot of people do. I think a lot of us are auto learners, and I really love reading my poetry. So I thought about reaching back out to the publisher to say, hey, could we do an audio? Or could you give me permission to do that? Because I think some people would.
Yeah.
Just put it on there.
And you can do that from right here at your desk.
Yeah. Cool things can be done now with technology that
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't have fathomed as much if the pandemic hadn't given us those. A lot of those, the time and the challenges to work those things out.
Well, I had a good chunk of time on my hands. I wasn't one of the people that lost their job or got laid off or anything. I work in an essential industry,
yeah.
like air quotes, of communications.
Yeah.
So I had about 6 weeks in April and May where I was home after the lockdown in March, and that's when this all kicked off with the podcast and whatnot. But
so this was born in the pandemic.
Most certainly, and it wouldn't have been born as quickly without it. So there's that. It's always something I've been wanting to do because I'm a podcast listener, and I know I wanted to generate content like this, but I had the money in my pocket and I had the time to do it, so I just said I'm gonna go buy this stuff and I'm gonna learn the thing and I'm gonna do it. But making visual art, painting canvases and stuff like that, I did. I became very prolific for that 6 weeks.
Oh yeah.
It was really nice to get in my creative groove and not have any responsibilities to take care of out in society because society was telling us don't leave the house, and I was like, that's what I've been trying to tell me my whole life. So
it gave me a vacation.
Right, one that I would have happily given myself if society wasn't as such.
Yeah.
But I did the thing and I painted a lot of paintings, and I think when I showed last year, so last year was a year and a half after March 2020's lockdown, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I had like almost 40 pieces to show.
Wow.
And I had 32 on display in one location and the rest of them on display at the other location. I had art hanging downtown in Knoxville for 3 months.
Wow.
And it was great to have all that crap out of my house so I could see the corners of my hallway and living room and all the stuff, because I don't have enough wall space in my house to hang everything up. So there's a lot of it just leaned up at the end of the hallway next to my bedroom door.
So you did a lot, 6 weeks.
I worked so much, and it was great because I had an extended period of time where I could really get into that creative groove for more than 3 or 4 days at a time, because the 5-day work week, the 4-day work week, all that jazz, that's 1 week. Then you start it over. Like I had 6 weeks of none of that to do.
And so
I got deep into my creative process and the way I like to do it, and I made a bunch of stuff, and it felt great.
Well, you see why writers do these retreats.
Oh yeah,
in essence was a retreat. And I did the majority of my, piecing things together, and a lot of just new stuff came during that time. So I think it was a period. It's the whole, a period has not been just negativity and just, there's been, and that's what the Azimuth is about. It's the fact that when we find ourselves on this trail that life or the universe has given us, we have no choice if we want to be better people than to try to find the light, and creativity is that.
Yeah. You had let me get this book out here because I've taken a pen to it and underlined it.
Oh, you have. I love that. That's how it's meant to be.
So one of the lines that I underlined earlier today, actually, I read a couple poems today before I got out here.
Awesome.
Let's see, where's it at? In all the ways we walk, we must seek the light, and I thought that was really cool, so I underlined it, and that resonated with me really hard because I play with light and the absence thereof.
Oh yeah.
As my go-to creative medium, and in the ways I play with light is really unusual because I tend to lean more on the absence of with all my glow-in-the-dark stuff, and I really enjoy playing with light 3 ways: the alternate light, the normal light that you would get from a bulb or the sun, and then the absence of. So something occurred to me a couple of years ago where I was like, you know what? It is absolute BS that when people turn their lights off in their house, they can't see their art no more.
Yeah.
So then I became really hard up on making stuff glow.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Because you can take my artwork in general and you can see it in 3 different ways. You can put it outside or in the room with the normal light and it looks great. You can turn the lights off and it'll do something. It all might glow, maybe just the background. You're not going to lose it. You'll see something. Or you can put it under ultraviolet light or any spectrum of other light otherwise and have a different interaction with this piece of art than you would under any other lighting scenario. So I've been really nerdy in the way that I play with light in a way that most people don't, I feel like. And I'm really happy that when people buy my stuff and they take it home and they turn off the lights, they can still look at it and go, whoa, that's cool.
Wow.
Even though the light isn't on. And if they're hip enough to have a black light, then they'll figure that out all by themselves at some point. Yeah.
So you saw that connection there.
Oh, one of my favorite things, I keep a flashlight on my table when I vend out in public. And people will just be like, oh man, this is bright and colorful, really cool. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. And then I'll reach my hand out with the flashlight, hand them the flashlight, and then they turn it on and like fan it across the table. Whoa! And I'm just like, that's my favorite part.
And that is a unique experience for people.
Oh, I really enjoy watching people like have their minds blown. Mm-hmm. Not that it happens all the time, but like I'm not going to sit here and say I do that all the time. But there are definitely some moments where you see people's envelope expand when it comes to what they think is art, when they see something and then put a different light source on it and it becomes totally something else.
Changes the whole thing.
Yeah.
I've been playing around with an image for my new collection. I was thinking back because I had written a poem up there. Do you remember the solar eclipse back in August 2017?
I was in the middle of a field watching that.
Yeah, you were one of those.
Yeah.
Well, I went to the woods.
Yeah.
And as soon as, I didn't have my glasses or whatever, but as soon as it hit dawn, I went to the woods and I thought, let's see. I was hearing the cicadas and hearing sparrows at the same time.
Yeah.
Night objects, night animals. And
the birds and the bugs were at the same time.
It was the coolest thing. And I'm thinking, but I was doing a little research and I saw the reference to when that sun and that moon kind of get right around each other. There's this little sliver that's called Earthshine. And what you said, you look into it. It's cool. But you said just what kind of reminded me is that played around with the various way. Who says the absence of light it's still all a part of the playing with light.
My experience of the eclipse was wild in a very similar manner. I was, where was I? Like Greenback or something like that, just slightly west of Knoxville, maybe 45 minutes or so, and Buckeye Farms, I think, is the name of the place.
Oh,
but they had a big gathering, and I camped there on the property with a couple of friends, glasses and all. Yeah, we camped out on the property the night before, and we all just sort of picked our spot in the field and laid down a blanket. We all just kicked back and watched the thing. And when it was at the peak of it and everything was going, you could see the corona and all that. The horizon was really bright, and then right above it, everything else was dark. So you could see the light on the horizon.
That's the Earthshine I'm talking about.
Okay, well then there.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But also, you heard all of the nocturnal animals, like, what in the world's going on? It's too early for this. And then all the insects and nocturnal and diurnal animals are also like, what is going on here? It's too late for this. And being outside during that particular moment was really, really neat. And it's definitely one of the most unique experiences I've ever had outdoors. Just being in nature as much as I was.
Yeah.
It was really cool to hear all those things at once, and everybody was the solid, like, what do we do? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things, and I'm thinking, if I hadn't had that snippet, I wouldn't even remember that. But somehow I came back from the woods after I came back from that whole, and I wasn't out in this cultural gathering, and that would have been so cool too. But I still had the idea of wherever we were in North America, because I don't think it was a global thing.
No,
we were all humbled by this kind of lateral phenomenon, and I don't know if the pandemic in many ways has kind of halted us in our paths too, but just sort of slow down and listen.
Yeah, it's allowed me to be far more reflective, just as a person, and not even a creative person, just as a person, which is nice. Yeah, it's been very helpful.
Yeah, so if we have made it this far. We've
Done pretty good.
We've done, I mean, we got a book, and we got a new art show coming up, and that's going to be in August, you said.
It's going to be in August at Next Level Brewing. It's still very loosely coordinated because we're pretty far out.
Plenty of time to do that.
It's going to be a thing, and if you're not there, you're square.
Yeah.
it's going to be a showcase.
Okay,
sure.
Folks, that was a commercial.
Yeah, right.
But you'll see it all over. Do you ever think about coming back in, like to our fall festival or doing any?
So the fall festival is
Expose.
usually the first weekend in October.
Yeah.
And I usually find myself busy otherwise, artistically engaged in something. I paint a lot of live shows and do stuff like that. So I'm usually somewhere.
That's the time of
like
year.
at least one weekend a month, I'm somewhere trying to do something live. But no, I haven't thought about it to answer your question directly, but I'm not opposed to it. I just know that a lot of these folks that would come to that party aren't exactly my crowd.
So you pick your crap parties.
Yeah, to be blunt about it, not that that's a bad thing. It's just that I know that a lot of the artwork I make has a very niche appeal, and that's okay with me because, like I said, I don't really do it for the appeal of it. It's more,
you find the venues and for the people who are receptive to that.
Yeah, I try to target those audiences because, like, in my social circle, I'm pretty plugged in with a lot of people that like that kind of stuff or enjoy that aesthetic quite a bit. So a lot of the electronic music scene in Knoxville is where you'll find a lot of my artwork.
That's neat too. So and for similar reasons, they're with music and things like that. They're coming from a subcultural perspective too.
So if I'm painting live and doing something geometric or abstract, it's a pretty welcome or warm reaction I get to whatever it is I'm working on when I'm at a show. Most of the time, you have the stray like, oh man, what is this? But like you can't be in public and not get one of those.
Yeah.
So you can't not have that interaction if you're in public.
Oh, or somebody will say, well. I don't really understand that poem, but you're not supposed to.
Right. I like the interaction with the public when I'm out and about.
Yeah.
Because you get to get that feedback firsthand.
And I think that's the process is for us in the call to create, but there would be no. I won't say there would not be art if there weren't, the viewers or the listeners or the readers.
You just wouldn't get shared as much.
You wouldn't get shared. And it's not about a claim to fame. I think neither one of us are in that. We're both coming from a perspective. I know you that you believe in bringing good to the universe. Well, there's a way that you can.
I certainly would not mind if me being financially stable was a byproduct of my creative efforts. And I've maintained that opinion for a long time. And I've also maintained a day job for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's a never-ending conflict, but it's not a bad friction. It's just friction.
Right.
But, it's a circumstance of living in society, which is one of those things I talk about, blah, 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 blah.
And, well, in the cost of living is going up. Gas and so many different things.
Yeah, right now in Sneedville, gas is $3.89 a gallon.
Is it really?
Yeah, when I came across the bridge at Clinch River Market, that's what the sign said. And for the record, I've never seen more expensive gas in Sneedville.
I haven't.
Than $3.89.
Oh, wow. I filled up in Morristown when I was there last week. Of course, I drive a Prius.
Right, so you get like 50 miles to the gallon.
Yeah, but it was, I think, $3.69. So here at home, it's usually
a dime more expensive between here and Morristown because we're further removed from society here.
And we're not dissing our home culture. We're all out
it's
there.
It's just we get gas expensive because we have to truck it so far to get here.
Yeah, people don't realize that it's chaos. It's a hurdle.
Yeah,
to get.
And honestly, the geographic isolation of home is kind of like a pressure cooker, but it's a good thing.
It is
for creative people, I think. Not that that physical limitation. Sometimes having a clear set of boundaries is really good for being creative because looking at a blank page can be very intimidating. And that's more or less the essence of the thought I'm trying to convey.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I do not mind knowing very well what my boundaries are. if they are there in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good way to term.
Yeah, and that's a reason there's not a lot of industry here, but there's a lot of culture and subculture. Society in Hancock County is very deep, but it doesn't go very far outside of county lines or geographically speaking, because it's hard to get it places literally and metaphorically.
Well, one of the things I'm dealing with too is returning to place, and in this new collection I'm working on is looking at the flip side of the coin of the problems of being remote. Yeah. And being not having the industry and not cost of living. I think property is pretty affordable here, but it's just anything that we have to buy here is going to be exponentially higher than if we were to buy it from out of town. But the flip side of that coin is the things that are preserved here. Yeah. That are...
and preserved well, too.
Preserved well. And just like the Clinch River, you think about those mussels, those endangered species of mussels that are... we have more diversity in that river than any place on Earth.
Yeah, well, one of the highest organic densities, for sure.
Yeah.
It's federally protected for that reason.
It's federally protected.
Lots of other reasons.
Lots of other reasons, yeah. But there are other things being preserved, I think, hopefully some folkways.
Right, and that was one of the things I was really excited to hear Rick say, is that he does a lot of the work he does and doesn't make any money for it because he gets demonetized via YouTube. Yeah. But he wants to do his work to help preserve the music that he makes and the music that inspires him. Yeah. That came out when he was a child and as he was growing up becoming a musician and all that. So he does a lot of preservation work just for the sake of preserving the art, which I think is very respectable. Yeah. If I was doing that kind of thing, I'd probably have to live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because, psychedelic subculture there, that's one of the most dense places on the planet. And if I wanted to do a service to the psychedelic art movement,
that's where you'd have to go.
You'd probably have to start there.
Yeah.
But, preservation of the art and creativity and culture around you can happen anywhere. I just use that example because that's specifically a hub for that subculture.
Yeah.
I think Rick does a great job doing what he does to preserve that because I know he cares. And, he's skilled enough to make sure it's done right.
Yeah. And you have to know what you're preserving. You have to know
and he does because he's lived it.
Yeah, and sung it.
Yeah.
And played it.
All over the world, apparently.
Yeah, I didn't realize it.
I didn't know he went to Canada.
Till I listened to that podcast. It was sort of amazing.
Yeah, he's been just about everywhere he's wanted and done things as he pleads. So being able to be a professional musician at that scale in a as you please basis, when he picked what he did and when he did it and where he would go, not many people are that lucky.
Yeah. Well, who knows? One day you may get to that San Francisco.
We'll see.
Coolest city ever, though. If you've not been,
I've not been to California yet.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places, but and there's such diversity.
Yeah.
Not geographically, but also people.
Yeah, it's California. There's everything.
But San Francisco is a good. I was inspired by the Beat Generation poetry that came out of San Francisco, and there's just art everywhere you look.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads into a two-pronged question that I have for you. So literary influences versus like geographical influences on this book, because the book is about nature to some degree.
Yeah.
So let's answer the nature question first. Are there any like physical geographic places that you can name as an influence for this book? Other than like your backyard?
Other than my backyard in Hancock County.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in the Southwest, Colorado. I love Colorado, the Four Corners area, and Moab, Utah. Geographically, to go to a place like that where the landscape is desert, but you can see a sunrise and you can see all the different colors and it's sparse and pared down. I think it reminds me of the artistic process where you have to get back down to that authenticity. Yeah. So I write a series of poems in second section called Outbound Treks, where I am actually trying to visually recapture some of those landscapes. Out into the world, you've heard me speak in class about living in Nicaragua. I'm teaching and working there for a year, and part of that recapturing the landscape, the geographical landscape, is not to forget the people that are there too, who are part of the landscape. And so that's been an influence too, to remember the people, not just my people, because I've written about everything from, Hancock County and some Melungeons, and there's a whole poem about that, looking at historical, cultural subcultures and things like that, but also looking out into the world to people who inhabit other places, other spaces. Turkey. I spent a summer in Turkey, and that's it's a Muslim nation, and it's a crossroads between the Europe and the Middle East, which a lot of people have their ideas about, and their stereotypes
very
about polarized ideas about. And I just saw the beauty of people where they were a part of the landscape, and part of an old layers of history.
Oh yeah, some of the oldest.
Yeah, you see these layers upon layers, and even the people can't describe everything. That they just accept who they are, and that part of what is encompassed in where we are is a lot of complicated history.
Yeah, very very nuanced and layered, and
even here
dense, very dense.
Yeah, so that's part of that prong. A lot of geographical influences that aren't just Tennessee mountains. They're mountains and places. And cities. Even have written about Guatemala. I was there during sort of the Civil War period. Dangerous time, but I felt peace in Antigua because people were there during the Semana Santa, which is a Holy Week, and it seems like the world stopped. Just all
just so everybody could do
in the streets, just to be there together. And I'm thinking, why don't we have more moments all over the planet where people could just be? Get beyond their languages and their.
You said it right then. Just be. That's the thing, and one of the things I tell people, like, oh, I'm gonna go do this. All right, cool. Go do be.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And I think people just forget to go be sometimes, and as grounding and healthy as an experience just being can be. I think a lot of people do themselves the injustice of forgetting they can just be sometimes.
I think people think in terms of reaching a destination.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, and that's how we've learned through art.
More of that end result logic.
Yeah. And so it's the journey. It's all the coolest things I remember that getting written about happen to be things that I never imagined I would have encountered. It's just along the way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they're found in those natural things that I see, but they're often just coming from just the whole process of just vegetating and meditating and being in that place.
Yeah, just being open to the moment that is.
And I think I just had an organic moment there and took you off that pronged question. But
no, that's fine.
Yeah.
These conversations meander as much as Clinch Rivers, and that's,
I like that.
and I very much prefer it do that way because usually I don't have to just blatantly ask people questions. You can just point the conversation the way.
I noticed you do that very very skilled,
and then I can get the answers I want without being super blatant.
I have a poem in there about the Clinch River. You may have read that one or not, but it's like in the form of it is floating errantly on this kayak, just going down.
I don't know if I've got that.
Well, you will resonate with that Clinch River. I know you.
I'll tell you when I read it.
But I think life is like that if you just be in it. Because there's some pretty amazing discoveries that lead to art that you never imagine.
A lot of the things that I've observed, through moments of just being, have ended up being inspirational elements to my art in some form or fashion. Not necessarily that you see them so clearly distilled that you can recognize it in the art, but I can tell you that this is this, and then you understand or can see the themes of that idea in this picture, not necessarily that you see the one-to-one representation of the thing in the picture.
I'm glad you used the word inspirational, because I think that was the word that needed to come out at some point. It's just, because it is all about being inspired.
If it would be very difficult for a person to output and not intake, because I'm not going to sit here and say the flow of things in is one-to-one to the flow of things out, but there's some kind of chemistry there between whatever it is, life experience, and whatever comes out on the backside of the creative process. And I think the inspiration is one-to-one, and they're mutually beneficial, because I can't imagine for me in my creative process separating out my life experience and then still being able to make the art I make. I can't separate those. That is inherently me, and one directly influences the other. But to what degree their influence is debatable. Like, you're not gonna see a whole lot of the things that I experience in my life directly in my art.
Yeah.
But the aspects or the highlights of whatever that is that have been distilled through my process are going to be there. And I would like to think they're easily seen if I tell you that they're there.
I like the word distilled. That's too. That is one I use a lot about. It's about like bringing it down to.
The core of it, the essence of it. Yeah. I feel like that word fits really well for a lot of people's creative processes, because a lot of people start with a wide array of resources or inspirations or images or whatever it may be that they do their thing with, and then all of a sudden it becomes one thing. Yeah. And distillation is the process of taking lots of things and turning it into one thing. And
drawing the impurities out and being at the essence of it.
And so, I've been saying that for a while. I will continue to say it until I find a better word.
I like it. I discarded the poem because the little demon on my shoulder told me to, but I'll find it and share, because it didn't really fit this collection, but I may use it later. But at one point I was just thinking, and it was just a poem about what this whole process has been during the pandemic to get this together. And I thought, oh my goodness, all I've been doing is just distilling these words. Yeah. Decanting,
Yeah. Well, that could have been like a at the back of the book.
It could have been back. We might go in the next one now.
Or it could be in the front of the next one.
Good. You had another part of the prong question.
Yeah.
I stepped off.
Do you have any literary influences, like other authors, other poets that you see influences in this particular work?
In this particular work.
Yeah.
I'll have to say, probably 3 that resonate with me. Maybe, I may have 3 or 4, but
the list can be however long. Like, we'll talk about it.
I love Walt Whitman, who is the sort of father of American free verse, creativity, because I think people used to at other day and age, and even some people still think that poetry has to rhyme. It has to have that, balladry, and it has to, you have to sing it like a song, and you can still have the cadence and the whatever, but it doesn't have to. It fits the mold that the artist wants to create, but not maybe a preformed one. And so Whitman was a nature writer, but also a commentator on his culture. He wrote during the time of the Civil War. So I think in the back of my mind, having read a whole lot of him, I just honor him and saying, okay, you could be free to be. Right. In what you create. Wendell Berry, who is a Kentucky farmer poet, and he is an environmentalist, ecologically, in tune to how the earth where we are, particularly those ways of life, like those in Hancock County that might be passing by, we need to honor putting those into word. But he's the nature writer. He's like the #1 bestseller nature writer. And so he is my, sort of my idol. Robert Frost, of course, the first poem I ever read and knew was a poem was I was in first grade, and my first grade kindergarten teacher introduced me to a poem called The Pasture. And it was by Robert Frost. I'm going to the pasture. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I don't remember the rest of the poem, but I remember that from age 6. And it was that invitation to go outdoors. Yeah. and to write about it.
And the theme of nature that far back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's present.
It is crazy. And sometimes you forget what's been back there residually in that informing that creative spirit. And the fact that it can still work its way out of this decades old brain. Modern writers, Amanda Gorman is a 24-year-old. I can say I look up to my students. I look up to young writers. I think they influence finding the courage.
Yeah.
To write her story as an African American in these times, and I look at the diversity. Margaret Atwood. I wrote a dissertation chapter on Margaret Atwood, who is the author of The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. Didn't work its way into it because I'm not into that sort of genre in this. But I think just being a storyteller and being able to tell the truths of what you have been given to see. So I do a bit of storytelling here. So I think some novelists have been, but if I were to distill the greatest influences, I would say it was Whitman, Barry, and Frost.
Okay. Short but very important list.
Yeah. Short, but it took me a while to say it.
Right. But the long answers are the more fun ones anyway.
Yeah. Well, don't forget I've been a lit teacher too. So.
Right. You touched on Tolstoy in the book.
Yeah.
And the book you referenced was The Kingdom of God's Within You.
Yeah.
I think's the name of the book.
Yeah.
I read that earlier today, and then I realized I have a copy of that exact book sitting on my dresser at home. So I want to talk to you about nonviolence for a minute.
Yes.
And I will tell you, I didn't get very far into that book. Probably a quarter or a third, but it was well into and past his explanation for his ethos of nonviolence that he details in that book. And I was a fan of the clarity and amount of he was very thorough with his logic when it came to applying this ethos to every aspect of his life. And I think that's what I respect about that point of view the most. He left no stone unturned when it come to applying this logic to every aspect of his life, whether it was interactions with government or interactions with his neighbor or whatever. Like, that ethos was present in his actions. And that level of dedication to an idea is very inspirational for me because he turned over every stone and applied that to everything. So if I can take what I do and as thorough and direct as that man with that logic, I can dance to the very ends of the extent of whatever idea I'm playing with if I apply that logic to that thing. Obviously nonviolence as a concept is great. I know you're a big fan. Yeah. We could go on about it all day.
Oh, yeah, we could have a whole podcast.
This is specifically the thing about it that I wanted to bring up. It's just the thoroughness of the application of that idea is amazing.
It is amazing. I've read Tolstoy's novels, but this book is not a novel. I mean, it's an influential piece, and it's very... these things are organic anyway.
Right, indeed.
So a lot of people they consider that sort of esoteric. It's just not, it's not something that's on people's radar. And I found it out through my study of Gandhi. It influenced Gandhi.
Yeah, and it was sent to me by one of my first roommates here in town. Like I took over a sublease in an apartment on the fort, and this guy just happened to be one of my roommates, and he and I talked to him yesterday. We're still really good friends. Shout out, Mark. He's like, man, have you ever read this? And I was like, no, I haven't read a whole lot from that guy. He's like, well, let me send you this. And he sent me that, and I spent a couple of days reading the first, 100 pages or so. Yeah. And then I put it down, and I've been thinking about that ever since I picked that book up. And I think it's a very insightful commentary onto the culture he was experiencing at the time. And, there's a lot of violence in culture at the time and a lot of friction between subcultures and government and, not very unlike what we have now, like 100 and whatever years later, 160 or 70 years later, whatever it was. And I think that it is very articulately laid out there, and it is very clear what this man means with his words when he wrote this book, and I greatly appreciate that clarity as well.
So go figure that the one person who interviews me has also read it. I probably got that far into the book myself.
Yeah.
Because there are so many layers, but he's very thorough. Did research. What wowed me is that he even uncovered during the American Civil War time that there was this whole subculture of nonviolence protest, or a pacifist who didn't believe in war.
Well, I also really enjoyed the delineation of terms that he put out because through each different time period of this movement, it was given different names and titles. And he says, this is what this is, but we call it this now for this set of activities in this period of time, which also really helps you follow this narrative of this ethos through time, which is really handy. Because talking about something, then jumping 20 years, and then talking about the same thing under a different name with the same set of actions can be confusing.
Yeah. But so cool that you saw that. I was happening through. I knew I wanted to read that because I'd been immersed. I'd done a series of workshops in California at the AHIMSA Center, which is a Center for Nonviolence. It's particularly for educators to say, okay, we want a new day. We got to talk about issues like gun violence and the proliferation of, hate speech and all kinds of things. And you have to peel back the layers to say, okay, here's Gandhi, here's Martin Luther King, who are, and look at Junior, and then there was Tolstoy, who I never would have thought in terms. I just thought he was a novelist.
Right.
And so I was happening to be on my way to Monteagle to see the Highlander, where the Highlander Folk School was, where Dr. Martin Luther King trained Rosa Parks. It was for me a mecca to say. It's in East Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, and we have civil rights heritage that we don't talk about.
Right. It's very steeped in Tennessee culture across the state, not just East Tennessee.
Not just East Tennessee. It's all across the state, but in Memphis and Nashville and other areas. But I happened to stop into it was a bookstore in Maryville, just outside of Knoxville. There, little bookstore, Southland Books, I think, and there it jumped out at me, a pristine copy, and I thought, this is for you. Had the same experience as you did, though.
Right.
Yeah, that thoroughness, and that sometimes things that you're supposed to read or experience come to you when they.
Well, the thing that got me beyond what I've already said is that that when you're on a train of thought or you're in the process, and then all of a sudden it takes a left turn, a perfectly logical left turn that you never expected. So it's like, I've done the thing, here I am now, what's next? Well, you continue with the thing that you were doing that got you here. Yeah. But all of a sudden you're in some drastically unexpected place. Yeah. And you're still doing the process.
You're still doing the process. And I think that whole poem, Mecca to Monteagle, is about that whole thing. And that's part of that trail, the symbolism of the term, of just finding ourselves on a trail. That's not, who says it's going to be straight and perfect.
Oh, right. Or where your next steps are.
You know where your next steps are. You just wait for that azimuth to kind of, that light.
The thing that guides you, whether you know it or not.
The thing that guides you, whether you know it or not. There's an internal compass.
Speaking of that particular question, one of the things I like to ask, I will shoehorn this question in here. One of the things I like to ask is, do you ever feel like a conduit of your work, not that you are the sole genesis of your work?
Thank you for asking that question.
It's one of my favorites.
It's a cool one. Yes. My grandpa, there's a picture up there. Deb Reed painted this picture.
I'm going to get her on here eventually, too.
She
can't escape it.
She cannot, and she would love it. You have even more fantastic conversation. But he was a primitive Baptist preacher, and I think through him, just that heritage of that we allow ourselves to be vessels. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I could carry that with me, and I thought of that in the back of my mind, sort of an inspiration there on the wall. Why I worked is to say, I create, and my little perfectionist Diablo says, this word might not work or whatever. Yes, I am in charge, but not really. Yeah. There's something. I am a conduit. I am a vessel for that. And it's the whole process to me. I would terms in however we can talk about spirit with a capital S, whatever is. That's part of that just being.
Yeah. For sure. I find that in my work that I can't say I'm always the point of genesis for the pictures that I create, because some of them are generated from my unconscious mind, and it presents it to me as this thing, and here you go, man. What are you going to do with it now?
Something larger the universe sends to
you. And then there are times where I can accurately say that this image is mine and I created it from scratch, but neither one of those are 100% of the time. And if one were to ignore the interplay between those ends of the spectrum, it would be foolish.
There's a balance. I love that.
Yeah,
there's a yin yang there.
There's definitely a balance, or it's definitely what's the word I'm looking for? Dang it! It's the extremes. It's paradoxical.
And you have to honor both.
Yeah.
You have to honor both. And I love the question. I'm glad you asked it, and I'm glad that you ask it to all your other people.
I try to remember to ask it. I don't always get all of them, but I try.
Actually, somewhere in the press kit I put out on the internet was a question of that sort. I love your word conduit. I'm adopting my grandpa's word of the vessel, but I think just allowing whatever it is to ripple through us.
Yeah. Being open. One of the things I like to say is being open to what is and what is to be. I'm not going to sit here and act like I have total control over the things that come out of my fingertips, especially when the ideas that come to my fingertips aren't exactly mine.
Yeah.
So I can't sit here and pretend like I know what I'm doing or have all the control over all the things. So.
And all the things that form us, and you were asking the questions about, and I know you could answer this too as an artist, the influencers of saying, okay, I've read a lot of great poets or whatever, or I've passed through these places, these geographical landscapes or whatever that influence me. We absorb almost like sponges, subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not. I feel like it's just part of living through the human experience. You can't turn that part of your brain off.
Yeah. So I think creativity and creation, the creator and all. I mean, I would slap some capital C's on,
right. Well, anytime I say conduit, it's never a lowercase word.
It's yeah.
The C is always capital when I speak.
The whole word might be all capitalized.
It depends on the piece.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. And some lend themselves. Some of you could walk away and say, yeah, I was inspired, or the Holy Spirit hit me, or however
the muse struck me and ran.
Like that painting there about muses. Yeah. And I have a poem in the latter section called Song of Wild Poets. And it's sort of about that whole process, about allowing, sort of like being a tabula rasa. Do you know that term? Just a blank space.
Okay.
And letting something automatic.
Whatever happens.
Yeah, whatever happens. And say, okay, now I don't question this. Some things I know that I'm not to question because they came from that real deep space of conduit.
Well, when I make the pieces that I make that are geometric, there's a lot of room for both sides of the spectrum to be represented, and it's a curious thing to me. And the reason I ask is because everybody, I think, that does something creative has the struggle between both ends of that spectrum. And how much of this is mine, how much of this isn't, and then where in the workflow actually making the piece do you lean one way or the other? I can look at some of the pieces I've made and I can say this stroke, and this stroke, and this color selection of these elements were totally my idea. And then all of a sudden I got a wild hair and I was just like, let me try this green, and slapped it on there, and then it worked. So
it's hard to generalize sometimes to talk, but we do. We talk generally about the process, but each individual
it does become that granular. And it's not a thing that I get bogged down with. It's just I know how to recognize in my workflow that sometimes I make these decisions, sometimes the decisions make themselves, and I'm just the guy holding the brush. And I'm okay with it. Like within me, where that interplay is, I'm very comfortable allowing that subconscious train of thought or those series of actions that I've been guided to, or whatever it is, the thing that came through me as the conduit is an interplay every second of the process. It's you can't ignore it, and you can't leave it out. It's always represented. It's just how much do you lean into it or not, I feel like. I think, in my creative experience, at least. I
think what you're sharing here, I'm just reminding that if people listen to these series of podcasts, it's like listening to, it's like organic education. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see someone like you, if not you, teaching the youth that this is what art is. This is what art can be.
Well, it lends itself to being that loose definition as well, because, so me as an artist, I start drawing and painting and sketching, and then it went from all that and still all of that to 3D design and 3D printing and additive manufacturing, and stack that on top of there. And then all of a sudden I wanted to do this, that, and the other, and I learned those skills. The loose definition lends itself to learning just to learn a lot, like I mentioned earlier, because I would have never expected myself to learn how to record and mediocrely edit audio to put this thing out. But here I am through the steps of my journey that I've come to a place where one of the things I needed to learn was how to capture and edit audio in a way that is presentable to a listener. And, I've spent money and I've spent time and I've done the thing to learn these skills. And that's why I know how to use these tools that we're using right now. Yeah. And if we want to get really basic about it, this is no different than my paintbrush. Oh, yeah. This is just a different set of tools with a different workflow, but the finesse is the same because I've given it the same amount of time and attention and willingness to learn, and I've thrown the same energy at it as I do when I paint or when I draw or when I take pictures, the other creative outlets that I have. So this is just a different tool.
I totally understand that, and I'm thinking that's what I've aspired to. If I had any success, that's what I've tried to do in my career as a teacher. I think you have to allow for that.
You've got to leave room for that wiggle room or that room of growth, whatever it is. Yeah. You have to account for that kind of space, because if you don't, it's going to happen anyway, and then your plan's going to be screwed.
Yeah. So you've got to be prepared for the unexpected. But I use this. I didn't when you were. I don't think I was using this term at that point, but it hit me more and more as time went on, because I'm all about eating organic and living organic if you can. But that term started just taking over me a lot.
Organic?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you used it a few minutes ago with something organic. But I think allowing, I started using it in the classroom, that with students, that you allow that whole process of just how you absorb information to be, you don't try to box things in. You've got to have some kind of application that's personal.
Yeah. If you don't, it's much harder to find or to be engaged with the thing if you can't find a touchstone or a point of view within it. And that's like the grounding point in surrealism. That's the tangible thing that the viewer or the listener or whatever would start from, and I think that vantage point is really important to just become initially engaged into a thing. If you can't find you or see a thing that you relate to in whatever it is, like how are you going to be willing to jump in there if you don't, find a kernel of something that you're comfortable or familiar with or can latch onto as a concept of the idea as a whole. It's I think it's easier for people to be engaged if they can find something like that. Yeah. And whatever it is.
Touchstone's a good term. Yeah.
So we've been sitting here talking for like 2 hours and 12 minutes. So the board says. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions and then we'll get out of here. Another 2-prong question. What was your favorite part about writing the book? And that could be workflow process, just the whole umbrella of that question. And then what was the worst part about it?
So the questions were...
Best part, worst part.
Best part and worst part. The best part was when I started pulling things together. Well, when I had a title for the book, I had a vision where I think I had something that wasn't just randomly thrown together.
Yeah.
That it had some purpose and meaning. To me, that was the best. Although all the little epiphanies along the way, and when I would reread some poems and got into a point where I felt like they were as near perfect as possible, those little discoveries, and it's like, you really wrote this? And then when you use that word for the conduit, that helped explain that, maybe that didn't all just come from me.
Right.
So those little discoveries, but I think realizing that things came together in a way that felt like they were meant to be, and that this piece was just, it was ready to release.
Right.
The toughest part,
doing it.
Finding the discipline, and listening to that voice that kept saying, this is not perfect, but not giving up, just realizing that there had to be a point where I was going to be comfortable with it and releasing it. Right. So it's almost like flip side of what I just said. When I felt like it was ready to go, that was just,
that's when you wanted to hold on to it the most.
But then there's other things that, you had to listen to the other voice and say, is it really ready? Or is it, an artist, I think in many ways feels like there's always something. If we're playing with things, there's always going to be, if I kept that
one more thing.
There's that one more thing. I think we all struggle with that. I think songwriters or musicians listen to themselves on the radio and want to say, okay, if I'd had one more day,
right.
I would probably added this instrument. So I think it's that. That's the other thing, I go back and I reread and I'm thinking, maybe I would have done that poem a little. And you just realize that there's your shutdown time.
Yeah, when you start questioning too much. And the last question is one I ask because I don't know everybody, and I'm really curious as how other artists are networked. Who is someone or other someones that you would like to hear on the other side of this microphone?
Oh, wow.
And if you can keep the answer to Hancock County, that'd be cool. But if not, other East Tennessee people are also welcome, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Definitely Debris, we mentioned. I mean, she has created and has been around and has left her art on school walls and just all around the county. I think she's created T-shirts and things like that. So I would definitely think that would be a lovely one too. Toby Gibson.
I was actually thinking about having him on the show earlier today because he posted on Facebook about a podcast that he did, and I was like, you know what? I need to talk to him.
When you said you were doing 2 in Hancock County, I thought he's going to be the other one. But, then I didn't realize about Rick, and I forgot. And I thought, that was a loosely held thing. That makes such sense. But, yeah, Toby definitely, because his work is moving. He's been in songwriting competitions and things. And he's just a barrel of fun, Oh,
yeah. I've hung out with him plenty. I enjoy
cool.
him.
You will probably perform a song or two. Miranda Russell, I don't know if you were familiar with Miranda, but she is a supporter of the arts. She created Hancock County Arts. And I think just talking generally about how to represent artists who are here. I think she was thinking about getting a gathering from sometime. We have these Spring Fest and different things, but get in people who create together. Right. From, like you, Ashton, who, just get a gathering together. I think that would be really cool. I'm going to keep thinking of this and send you over some ideas.
Yeah, you can totally shoot me a message later with other folks that you want to suggest, because telling you that right now is kind of putting you on the spot.
It is putting you on the spot, but Toby,
I do that because the microphone's on and
that's a commercial.
Well, not so much that. It's just that if I forget who you say, I can go back and listen to it.
Well, I'll shoot you over a text message later, but Toby was on my mind, and since we also organically brought up Deb,
right.
She'd be great to listen to. I'll tell you another one I'd be cool if he ever came back this way, is talk to Paul Reed. Paul Reed, a professor of linguistics, but his major area of study, he's published lots of things about how the way we speak here That's creative.
Right.
We think our voices, what you hear preserved in the hills of Hancock County, we speak creatively and we don't even know it.
Right.
So I think to think of that in terms of someone who's preserved language.
Valiant work, very, very noble of him. I greatly appreciate it. Dad and I had a conversation about local dialect earlier today, and that irony and the timing on that.
Yeah.
Now, if the last thing I can get you to do is tell people where they can buy your book, your social media outlets, all that jazz, the normal stuff.
Awesome, and thank you for not forgetting that. I would have forgotten that.
Well, if it doesn't happen right now, it goes in the episode notes. So
Right.
one way or the other, it's covered. But I like to hear the artists do it themselves.
You can find me a couple places. Whiff and Stop Publisher is my wonderful publisher. You can find me on the Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. And if you are in question, you can always go to DanitaDodson.com. And I have also the little links to my social media. I have Danita Dodson author that they can join on Facebook. Danita Dodson on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And I'm on TikTok, although I've only done one
What?
thing.
You have a TikTok?
I just did my trailer for the book is on TikTok. But that's the only thing. I'm kind of a voyeur and listen to other people. So, yeah.
Well, everybody, this has been the latest episode of the KAAMP. I'm Thomas Zachary. That was Danita Dodson. Thank you for listening, and enjoy.